Okay, welcome to the video on the Cubist Shaded Shapes project. So you need a piece of paper, pencil, some sort of ruler or straight edge, and some circles that you can trace around. So we may not have looked at the Cubist PowerPoint just yet, but Cubists like to break things into geometric shapes, and they liked to sort of shade those shapes in all different ways. They didn't want it to be realistic. They didn't want it to look like real life. They wanted it to look like you were looking at it from many different viewpoints and simplifying it. And so when they first started showing this art, this abstract art, an art critic came along and he said, well, it just looks like a bunch of cubes. And so the name Cubism kind of stuck. Even though he meant it as an insult, it just sort of became what it was. So I'm at home and I'm just going to trace whatever circles I could find. This might be cut off in the video a little bit, but it's going right off my paper too, like that. Let me do this in pen, actually. Just for the video, I would do it in pencil on yours. So this might not be traced perfectly, but that's okay. We're not trying to be computers here. So right off the page there, and I'm going to put another one maybe of these big ones over here, right off the page. And now I'm going to use this smaller lid to make some, and I can put this right inside here. I can overlap it. It can also go off the page. I probably want to end up with a decent number of these, maybe 5 circles altogether. So far I have 3. What I'm really trying to think about is like, how do I want to break up this page? All these really big, this big area, I'm going to break that up. I don't want it to be that big when I'm done. So I'm going to make this go right off here. Make another one right here. So I'm up to 5 and I'm just trying to decide, does it feel fairly broken up? And if I think so, I'm good, and I can move into breaking it even further with some straight lines instead of curves. Or I might just put one more here. Okay, I think I'm good. Now I'm going to use a ruler, or in my case, I just have a piece of wood that I'm going to use to begin to break this up. So I am going to mostly draw lines from one edge of the paper to the other. But again, I'm thinking, okay, this is a huge shape, and I'm going to shade every shape I make. This shape is just too big, right now to shade it all one way. So I'm going to break that up just by putting a line there. And then I'm going to keep going. And I know sometimes my camera goes in and out of focus. It's not really made for making videos, but when it goes out of focus, it'll refocus. So now I'm just breaking it up. I did a painting once in college where my professor said, like, oh, that was very bold because I had made these lines go all the way across the paper. And I hadn't thought of it that way. I was just trying to break up the space. And so be bold. If you want to make big lines, make big lines. But definitely consider, is this too big for you to shade? And if so, let's break it up. Also, every shape I'm creating is going to be shaded. Is that an interesting shape? Do I maybe want some triangles in here? And then once you have enough geometric lines, you feel like there are small enough shapes for you to shade. And I know you might be thinking like, well, these are too many shapes for me to shade. But you'll get it. Take your time. And this is actually an awesome project for learning how to shade because there are so many places to shade, and it's so much good practice. And if you don't shade perfectly in every one, that's okay. Doesn't matter, because the overall design is still going to be interesting, and you're going to get a lot of good practice. Okay, so I think that's my final design, and this camera's a little close. You can't quite see the whole thing, but there it is. So then once I have it, I'm happy with it, and I'm going to begin shading. I'm going to use color pencils or crayons for this. In this case, on my video, I'm going to use color pencil. So I can decide at this point, do I want to use like every color of color pencil that I have, or do I want to limit myself to a color scheme? So a color scheme means you're going to use, I really love the way purple and green look together. I'm going to use purple, green, and blue, and I'm going to stick to those colors. And then maybe use dark blue and light blue, but you stick within those colors. But you don't have to use a color scheme. unless I tell you otherwise. But in this case, I'm just going to start with one color. So I chose this sort of color, and I'm going to pick a shape to begin with, wherever I want to. And I can start shading from one side, from any corner, any side that I decide I want to shade from top to bottom, from bottom to top, any way I want to. I like to kind of start in a corner. And so what I'm doing is just pressing really hard to get the darkest value I can. And then I want to make sure that I get some medium values. So I'm lightening up. I'm not pressing quite as hard. And the further that I get away from that, the lighter I'm going to press. Now, something that just occurred to me is like, this shape is very, very big, and I'm going to run out of values probably before I get to the end. It's just not enough. So it's not all colored. And I can leave a little white, but that's probably too much. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to extend my darkest value back out by putting some more layers in there and bringing out some more of those medium values. And I know I'm going kind of quickly, but I'm going to encourage you, I'm doing that partly for the video, and I'm going to encourage you to go nice and slow when you start this, because it's really the purpose of the project. It's going to be an awesome looking abstract, very abstract image when we're done, but really the purpose and the intent behind it is that you learn how to shade and you learn how to make all those values from dark to light. So as I'm getting in here, I can go back and make some more of those medium values up in here and darker values. So dark values can be made in two ways, by pressing harder and by just layering up. And so I'm kind of pressing fairly lightly to make my medium values and using mostly layering. And as I get to out here, I'm pressing very, very lightly. And I can bring some color all the way to the end if I want, or I can leave a little bit of white. I think I'll go ahead and make some color all the way through. So there's one spot that is shaded. Let me bring it a little closer too, since I don't know how much of this will show up on the video. And now I'm just going to pick another area. And since I already have a red color pencil in my hand, it makes sense to just kind of jump around and do red somewhere else and red somewhere else. So maybe I'm going to shade this little tiny spot now with red. What you never want to do is use one color one time, unless you want that particular spot to be the focal point of your whole picture. If you want to emphasize one particular shape, then using one color only one time will draw attention to it. But I don't want that for my Cubist shaded shapes. I want whoever looks at it to look at the whole thing. So if I use red and red over here, their eye's going to kind of move around. It's going to move all around the picture. I'm leading them to look at the whole thing by repeating my color. So I'm going to pick another area and color that with red. And then maybe I'll switch colors and use another color until eventually my whole paper is colored. And I think that is all there is to remember. Just keep practicing, pressing darker to get those dark values, and really think about those medium values. Have you built up enough to have a medium value? And are you pressing super light? And the more you do this, the better you're going to get at it. So in the beginning, maybe it looks like mostly one value, but the more shapes you fill in, the more it's going to look shaded. And that's another good reason to jump around. So maybe in the beginning, they're not quite as shaded. And that way you end up having a variety of values spread throughout the whole picture. Okay, have fun. Take your time. Be patient with yourself.